Good afternoon and welcome to Vets Play Dungeon Mapster with your host, that's me, Brandon, also known as Rogue 7. Today, we're going to go through some of the basic stuff about making Dungeons & Dragons map in a program called Dungeon Painter Studio. It's available on Steam, currently in pre-release. It's a great program, costs a few bucks, but they're constantly developing new content, and it has a fantastic user community which makes new elements that anybody can use. So, I'd like to address a few things today. I have a lot of people ask me questions about how I plan maps, how I plan the encounters around the maps, and everything like that. And I think we'll discuss that while we're going. You can see here that I have kind of sketched out the map in mind. For those of you who watch our D&D campaigns, this map doesn't pertain to y'all. This is for a different campaign that I'm running, so no one can cheat. So this is in a place called Terenga Port, and right now we're looking at a Catacombs, where there are some enemies, an enemy army. Oh, I'm just finding out that no one can hear me. That's really weird. Oh, just kidding. User error. Good job, Sam. So like I was saying, this is in a place called Terenga Port, where an enemy army has been slowly infiltrating, and they're making use of some extensive catacombs to hide. So it's going to be looping and twisting, and the way this is built, there are layers upon layers that have been built over time. So we're going to kind of go through and see how we can make it look like it had been built and then through the ages added to. So without any further ado, we'll get started. So this is the program we're using. It's called Dungeon Painter Studio. Like I said, it's on Twitch, or on stream. Alright. Steam. I can't talk today. Now, it's got a little bit of a learning curve. It is somewhat intuitive, but there are some features that take some practice to get used to. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how to use the program. There are tons of great tutorials on YouTube for that. But what we are going to do is get right into it. You can see here that I've already started with a white outline, and this is just by the dimensions of our overall map that I've done here, just so I have a guide and reference point. Alright. So here at the very bottom, I have gone ahead and added a reference marker for my start. And we're just going to get started by adding in a few basic walls. There's two main approaches that you can use on this program. You can start with the walls and add the floors later, but it has a really cool feature where if you do the floors first, then it will automatically populate walls for you. It saves a lot of time. So we're going to do that. I'm going to start with the rectangle floor, and I like to go through and kind of pick my floors afterward, but down here you have all sorts of different resource packs that have different textures. I'm a big fan of the Tots Complete Fantasy Pack, and you can see that there are just more floors than you can shake a stick at. So we'll go ahead and put one up, and if you guys that are watching have any suggestions or ideas on what you want to see a floor or wall look like, let me know. We'll try it. Alright, so here we go. Starting here, we have a wall that is going to be, well, let's double check the length there. One note I didn't take, so you can see I usually put in the dimensions to save me some time. I forgot to for this wall here. So we can see that is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 50, 55, 60, 65. So that's 65 feet. 5. Alright. And we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, and 5. And we're going to drag it over to fill. Pardon me. So now that I've got the rough dimensions of that one room, I'm going to go ahead and kind of pick the floor to go with it. I have a lot of options, but this room is supposed to be rich and regal. This is the where the heads of the local families and noble families are laid to rest. So it's supposed to look really clean, pristine, nice, but it is still kind of a mausoleum. So we could do marble with circles, and we can edit that and fill it. And if we zoom in, that's pretty busy. So I think we might instead try going with a simple marble gray. Now I like that, but the tiles are a little bit bigger than I want. So what I'm going to do is over here, we're just going to adjust the scale down. I like that, about 50%. So from here, we're going to start adding on the next rooms, and then I can go through and add the walls. Now you can see over here, I have basically the layers, and I can go ahead and start building those up as I go. That way when I come back, I have them separated by what room is what, so it's a lot easier to find things. So we'll come back through here, and we have our next one, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and this is going to be by 50. So that'll be 10 squares and down. Now I'm going to go through and do a different flooring in here a little bit later. So our next room, we had 5, 10, 15, 20, 35 in height. It starts with 2 spaces in between. All right. And we will bring it over till right there. All right. Now, this is going to be our Hall of Warriors, where the 4 martyrs of this city were laid to rest in a great battle, or after a great battle. And here, let's go ahead and bring that up a little bit more. All right, so we're going to undo that. I actually want that to be just a hair taller, so we'll do that. All right, and then right up here, I want to put a shrine to Tyr, the god of justice and war in the Forgotten Realms. So that will be, looking at maybe by 20. All right, so now it's getting a little bit hard to differentiate everything, especially since it's all dark and black, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this plot I just made. I'll right click on it here and I will add a wall. Now you can see this automatically populates a wall for me, right? Causes a couple of problems. There's no room for doors, but we'll fix that in a minute with another cool feature. Right now I'm not a huge fan of this wall. This is supposed to be somewhat ornate, not quite as nice as the nobles, but it is the Hall of Warriors. So we'll go ahead and look through what I have. I have a lot of different stone options and wood options in here, but I'm not seeing anything I really love. Another really good pack that I'm a big fan of is Fantasy Fortress. Still not seeing what I want, and so we can go ahead and try Topps Collection. There we go. Topps Collection is a little more comprehensive, for walls at least. Thinking I like this one. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. So we'll go ahead and right click on the wall blocks, and we can fill selected. I think that looks pretty sharp. Okay, so like I said, we're having a problem with no doors. It doesn't leave me a lot of room to build off of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click again, and it's going to become a poly wall, right? And what that does is it actually turns it into, when it's bold here, you can see that there are multiple items in that file basically, and it turns it into a series of 4 walls. So I'll use my selector tool, and I will edit that to be about there. I want to put a double door here. Now I can draw another wall, or I can cheat, just copy and paste, and then drag it over. Alright, we're going to do the same thing down here to this wall. Again, I want to set a double doors that are actually going to be open, so not really doors as much as an entryway. Copy paste. There we go. So now I'm going to go back. I'm going to call this shrine wall. And I'm going to combine it with the floor. You can make sure you have the right floor by selecting both and grouping them together. And now it's going to make it easier for me to edit room by room as long as I group everything in one room together. So I'm going to go through and do that for a few more of the rooms. And we can once again just select here. We can add our wall. And for the wall, I can insert or fill selected. Turn it into a polywall. Go into it and we can start editing those. So a lot of people ask me, although I wouldn't say a lot, but the few people that are interested ask me how I come up with the maps, right? And that's a great question. It's honestly really different for every scenario. Sometimes I like to build a map for a specific scenario, and sometimes I like to just have fun and build a map and then build scenarios around them. More often than not, it's the first, but when I have more time, I definitely like to make maps and then see what comes of them, or just have them in my back pocket for random encounters, or if I just really fall behind on planning. So what I did here in this map is I actually do have a plan, as you saw, for a very specific type of encounter. So this one's actually going to start very low key, and we're going to end up ramping it up. So the first couple rooms are not going to have any enemy encounters. It's just going to be them kind of traversing the area, finding things, because the enemy wants to remain hidden and not just appear to anybody who would walk into the mausoleum to visit an ancestor or bury a body. So call that shrine, and we'll call that Hall of Heroes Upper. Alright, so we have two sections to the Hall of Heroes here. So once again, I'll go ahead and throw that wall around here. And go to my palette. We can see that the wall I already have used are in my palette here. So looking at the walls, I can click, right click, and fill selected. And turn that into a polywall. And we'll go on into it. So something to bear in mind when you're building these maps is kind of where you want your encounters to take place, right? So like I was saying, if you want to just build a map and fill your encounters in, that's really fun. But with this one, I have a very specific type of enemy that I want to use, and so that kind of helps to dictate the aesthetic of the map to a degree, and where things are going to actually be going down. So with that in mind, later on I'm going to want to have a lot of different places for people to be staying. And if you actually look on the map, or the kind of rough sketch I did, you can see that up here, once you get to where the enemy is actually hidden in the top section, you have different sleeping areas, several barracks, because it is supposed to be an army, a dining area, a place for the commander, etc. And so you kind of want to have that in mind. It's kind of separate from the rest of this crypt aesthetic. So this is a good general layout for this right wing before we get into some of the stuff that's a little different. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having to redo all of that work, and let's go ahead and combine my layers. Instead of having to redo all that work, what I'm going to do is just copy it, flip it, and paste it on the other side. Because when it was originally designed, there would have been some symmetry to it. All right. Call this. That's exactly it. Throw it down, flip it, and reverse it. Napos forever. Ah, how you doing? All right. So we'll take those sections there. Let's see. All right, we don't need this. We don't need to copy that. That's our central point. So we'll copy these three. Taking a break from schoolwork. What are you studying? Well, Napos Forever is telling us what he's studying. What we're going to do is right up here, we have the flip vertical and flip horizontal. Pretty straightforward use, right? So I still have those 3 layers highlighted. I'm just going to flip, and that puts my doorway over on the right side. Informatics. Oof. I would never want to do that. Although medical informatics at like a hospital, they make dope, or they make bank, so it's not a bad job, but not for me. All right. So we're doing a merchant side over here. We kind of have that class system. In the center is the nobles. On the right are the warriors, kind of the second tier citizens. And then over on the left side, we have the merchant class. Still more well respected than, say, the peasants, the paupers, and stuff like that. But their side is definitely not as nice. So we're going to go through and rename these so I can remember, keep everything differentiated, right? So we'll go merchant middle. Oh, what these? Sam's telling us that there's a reason they make bank. What's that reason? Aside from the fact that they're highly specialized and very needed. And merchant base. True that. Informatics is tough tracking all those trends and reporting it all in a good way. But I have a deep respect for anybody who can do that. Alright, so we have our basic structure for the lower portion. This is before there would have been expansions, right? So this would have been the classic kind of old original crypt. And over time, people are going to go ahead and add to it. Right? So we're going to go ahead and add to this middle section what I'm calling the Hall of Dukes. Right? And this section is 30 feet wide by 65 tall. So we'll find that central portion. It should be 1 in. Scroll out just a little bit. And we want to go up and 5. So it's a pretty big area. Right? And we'll fix the floor sizes later. We're actually going to put a different floor in this section since it was built afterward. Right? I note that I haven't done the walls yet. I haven't picked which wall I really want to use, so I can always come back to that. Okay, so this will be the Hall of Dukes, and we're going to have several very ornate sarcophagi later, which is actually pretty simple with Dungeon Painter Studio's Objects tool, which we'll use extensively toward the end of the map, which we won't get to today, but that's okay. All right, so and if you look down through the objects, it's all these pre-made objects that you can use to kind of flavor your dungeon or city or whatever else you're doing. So after the kind of Hall of the Dukes, we just have an area where the lesser nobles are buried, right? And so that's going to be, and we can look back on our reference. So we know it's going to be 130 wide by 30 tall. Let's just, for ease, see how far out that is. That's 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it is 10 blocks out to either side. I is good counter. Alright, so what I can do is just come out 2, 4, 6, 8, and yep, lost count. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright, and from here we're going to go up by 6, and we're going to come over and make that all the way to there. All right, and that, if we do a test line, if we don't feel like counting, should, there we go. So that looks about right, but let's double check. 26, that's perfect. All right, and so we'll come fill this in a little bit later as well. All right, so now we have the general layout of at least the nobles area. So we want to think about how the lesser folks would have started expanding the mausoleums and such for their family members through the ages. And so the warriors would have definitely carved out an area in this region. I actually think it might look better if we go into our shrine here. And instead of having a double door, since that wasn't really intended, maybe what we can do is expand this wall and make it look like they kind of cut a wall out and put in an improvised door, right? It'll probably be smaller, not a double door in this case. So makes sense to kind of shorten that down. And that's another thing, whenever I'm doing these maps, sometimes I just pull them out of my head as I go, and oftentimes I have a rough design. It's rough for a reason. You're going to change it constantly. So this next room, if you can see here, and let's go. So I'm not that used to a Mac, so I'm not the best at just zooming in. If anybody knows a shortcut for zoom on a PDF, that's great. You can see right here, this room's a little different shaped. So I have two options, right? I can do the rectangle, which we've been doing, or I can use the polygon. I'm going to use that polygon. It's going to save me a little bit of time. So from here, I'm going to go up, and then we're going to go over about 3. We're going to come up 5 squares. And you can see the numbers by the little dot tell us kind of how far we've moved since the last waypoint we put in. So now I want to go over by 9. I want to go down by 9. Cut it over by 2 because I want kind of a little section that was added again later. And I can just click again, or I can just finish it off, right? So this is going to be kind of where the NCOs, non-commissioned officers, or later lesser officers were added because they just didn't quite make the cut. Now I haven't made it so everybody can be buried here because in the society that I've built, it wouldn't really make sense. A lot of the lesser people can't afford a crypt or a mausoleum, so they're just buried in standard graves, which we'll be building a graveyard to go over this before we actually present it to the players. So if you can see on the reference map, and I'll kind of scroll us down here, at the top of the merchant place, it doesn't go straight up. Too much symmetry gets really boring. There's a degree of symmetry that's really aesthetic and nice for the player, but if you do it too much, it becomes predictable and just shows you didn't put that much effort into it. It's so easy just to move something a little bit to kill the symmetry and still make it fun for the players. So instead of having us come out through the top, we're going to come out through a small door on the left. Again, it's going to be kind of like they cleaved their way through it well after the rest of the mausoleum was built. So what I can do, go into my shrine walls here, and we'll double click here so I can edit that one, hit enter or escape. Do the same here, and we're going to pull it up right there. Now again, since I'm lazy, I'm just going to copy and paste that wall segment over here, double click and shrink it. I always could have just clicked on the wall segment here, gone down to my palette, which will only save what you've done that session. So if you save and exit and come back, your palette's empty again. So just bear that in mind. You might have to go search for it again. So you get your wall, and you can just manually draw in a wall if you want. All right, so to lay out the rest of my floor plan, we're going to build what the lesser noble, or with the lesser merchants, and a couple of them more wealthy, unskilled laborers would have placed bodies into. Again, we're going to go ahead and use that polygon function. All right, I'm going to move it out, and then we brought it up by 3, so it's just a bit higher. We're going to bring that over by 5, and we're going to, as Saljek or Sakijek so eloquently put it, we're going to drop it, and we're going to bring it down by 10. All right, and coming back over by 4. And then if you don't like all this scrolling up and down and stuff, you can always zoom out. I like to be as close in as possible. It just makes it so I feel like I'm a little more able to see what's going on. All right, so with this room, if you go ahead and take a look at the reference again, we've just built this section here. And so that's the last thing a player would normally run into easily. What we're going to have behind, say, a bust or an upright sarcophagus or some kind of panel is going to be the hidden entrance. Because think about it, the bad guys aren't just going to make it so they're easy to find. It's going to be hidden or at least difficult to get to them. I didn't feel like putting traps in on this because it doesn't make sense that an army that's slowly trickling in to invade the city is going to have time to trap everything. So we just made it so they hid their entrance. They actually probably carved it out so that no one who's been in here before would really recognize that it should be there. So remembering that sketch that we did, we can go ahead and, this is a long rectangle, so we'll save ourselves a little bit of time. And we'll start from here. And it's going to go up 95. So that should be, if my math is right, 18. But one thing I don't want to do is accidentally build it under the merchant shrine like I did this floor here, because that's not the merchant shrine section. I want all of them to be different so I can kind of easily edit them. So we're actually going to cut that out, go back to the root menu and paste it in. And I'm going to name that Poor Merchant Floor. Alright, and while we're naming stuff, let's go ahead and Lesser Warrior. I'm a great typist, I don't know if you can tell. Alright, so we have the Lesser Warrior floor. Alright, and up here, this is the Lesser Noble floor. Alright, and we can still see this is the Hall of Dukes, so there we go. So everything should be named now, except for this would be our entrance. So entry hall floor. And you can see all of these start to build up pretty fast, and it can get kind of overwhelming. I'm a huge fan of folders, so I'll go ahead and subfolder some of these. So nobles, Hall of Dukes, we'll go with the entry hall. There we go. Still learning the Mac buttons. And we'll go ahead and link those highlights to show us which one we just linked. And we'll call that the Noble Wing. And if we break into it, then we can see our 3 sections. It keeps it from being quite as overwhelming. It takes a little bit longer to find each thing because you have to click through all the subfolders, but in the end, it's a lot simpler. So we'll do the same thing with our merchants. Merchant. We'll group those, and we'll call it the Merchant Wing. So if you do it this way though, the only thing you have to do is really pay attention to make sure that you're not building the wrong things in a folder that's already built or in the wrong folder. So if you're bouncing back and forth between different places on the map to put the same object, you can tend to do that. And then when you try to move that object or resize it, if you're not in the right folder, you can't access it. It's kind of to protect it. So it's a little bit of a learning curve, and I guarantee you'll see me do that, but we'll all learn from it together. All right, so we'll group this, and looking at the warriors, Hall of Heroes, and we'll group that into the warrior wing. So one thing I just did is I accidentally forgot to put this shrine into the warrior wing. Too easy though. We can just cut it and paste it in. Right? We could have also just grouped them together, but that would have created a subfolder within the subfolder, which becomes really obnoxious. So if you forget to originally group something, cut it and paste it. Right? All right. So now it's a lot less overwhelming over here. My ADD, OCD, whatever I've got isn't like screaming at me, so we can totally move on. So the next section of the map that we're going to throw down is, in my mind, kind of what might have been carved out. It could have been carved out by the invaders, or maybe by really poor folks that still wanted to give their family members the honor of a burial in this illustrious catacomb tomb thing, but really couldn't afford it, so they would have hid the door. I haven't decided exactly which way yet, but I have decided that beyond that door, instead of kind of loose, rough walls that we have here, it's going to be mostly dirt, supported by wood beams, kind of like a mine, as it were. All right, so we're going to go ahead and fill that out right now. All right, so like we said, that one's going to be 95 tall. It's going to be 5 wide, and it's going to start right here. So for this one, I am going to zoom out just because it's going to be so tall. All right, so let's see if we can get it all the way up. All right, so it should be about here, would give us our 95 in height. And of course, like a goofball, I forgot to drag it. All right, we're gonna bring that all the way over the edge so it's 5 wide. That's kind of one of the good things about these reference lines. You just know you can go all the way to it. All right, we'll fill in the inner walls here in a little bit. For every section, we're gonna put in pillars and all that stuff. What we are gonna do here now is we're gonna take a look at putting in our barracks. There's a couple different ways you could go about doing this, right? I could just do this whole area using the polygon shape. I find that to be a little bit overwhelming. Pardon me. Additionally, if I put in each floor or each group of floors separately, then when I try to put the wall on them, it'll save me from having to do these intermediate walls, all of this area. So that's what we're going to do. It might be a little more time consuming up front, or it might seem like it, but it saves you a lot of time with the walls later. So we're going to put in all of these barracks and then this hallway. And again, if you find a different way or just find it easier to go a different way, that's totally fine. You do you, boo-boo. All right, these are all going to be 20 high, so that's going to be 5 squares. 4 squares, I math good. 2, 3, and 4 here. And 50 feet, so that's 10. And now since I know all my barracks are the same size, it's going to be really easy for me to just copy and paste and drag it over. Again, copy, paste, and drag it over. Alright, so this is the width of the remainder of the dungeon. I'm not going to hit all the way to the white line, which is totally fine. I didn't plan to do that anyway. The reason I did this size of white line is that's the dimension of the graph paper I was using on my app on my iPad. So just to make it easier, I like to have that white line filled in. All right, so I know that this hallway is going to be 10 tall, but that kind of doesn't line up with what's going on here. All right, if you remember in the other design, you could see that the hallway was supposed to abut, or it's supposed to butt in all the way here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to drop the floor just a little bit by selecting it, editing it, and we're going to drop it down by that, and we're going to add a little nub. All right, and that's where this hallway is going to butt up to. To save us some heartache later, we're going to go ahead and once again group things, and we'll call this the dirt path. And then we know this is barracks 1. We know that this one is going to be barracks 2. And we'll specify floor, that way we don't have to change them later when we group them with other things like walls and filler. And this is barracks 3 floor. All right. So shout out to the one person still watching. I appreciate you. All right, going back into the DPS here. I'm going to link all of the barracks together just for ease of finding them later. All right. So we know that the floor for this next segment is going to be a little oddly shaped. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my polygon walls here. And it's going to come up by 5, over, up 1 more, and it's going to run the length of this area. All right, and so we're starting to get a lot of stuff going on that can be a little bit confusing. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and change some of the flooring just so it's a little bit easier to track. So again, you select what you want to change, click on any of the floor things and go to search. You can go to folders, but I don't really care what it is right now, so I'm going to type red. And we have all sorts of different red things. Right, so I'll right click and fill selected. Right. Okay, when we come on over here, we have our dirt path. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with, we'll say blue. Search for it. Make sure it's on the floors. We have all sorts of different stuff. So just for gigs and chisels, let's go ahead and make it water. Right? Doesn't matter. This is just for my own sanity. So I can just kind of track the different sections of our map. Okay. All right. So at the top of this hallway, we'll go back to our palette using this marble gray design, which isn't going to matter because once you get through this area right here, once you pull through this tapestry or whatever I'm using to hide this door, this is actually a big central cavern that had been undiscovered. Somehow whoever is coordinating all this found the central cavern and they decided it was a great way to store the troops and let them hide out. So what we're going to do is all of this will have a similar floor. It's probably going to be a stone of some sort, not a tile or a brick or anything, just a natural stone. And then these walls, we're going to say that they're wooden walls. This cavern is actually going to be pretty tall when I describe it, on the magnitude of 50 to 70 feet tall. Right? So probably naturally formed somehow, so we'll have to round off some of these edges, which isn't that big of a challenge. But that does make a challenge for where these walls came from. They wouldn't naturally appear. So we're going to have them be constructed, possibly out of wood, or maybe someone brought in piles of stone from mining out some portion of it and made some stone walls. What I think will work best is actually a mix of both. It'll just kind of add to that kind of ramshackle feel we're going for. All right. So, next thing we're going to build is what's north of this hallway. So again, we have a barracks up here that is 25, so 5 tall by 50, so that's 10 wide. We have a hallway that's going to be 2 wide here, And then this next one is supposed to be 25 by 40, so that'd be 8. The numbers, if you're not tracking each of these squares, is 5 feet in the game world. So if I keep jumping back and forth between big numbers and small, I'm just dividing or multiplying by 5, which I'm not very good at, so if I mess up, feel free to yell at me. Alright, and then over here, we're going to have a section that is supposed to be 45 by 25, the same as the others. So we'll go 8 by 5. Now this section, this training area is what it's going to be abutted directly up against the armory, which is going to be another 8 by 5, right? And then we're going to have some hallway spaces in here and 2 more rooms up here. So to fill in those hallway spaces, I think I'm just going to use the polygon to help with the shaping. Comes down to here. Now we got something weird here. This shouldn't be 3 wide, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 8. Got it. That was supposed to be 45 wide. So we'll go ahead and just pop that out by 1 and do the same to this one. Alright, so now we'll use that poly wall to put in the hallway that's going to be here. It's going to be a narrow bit of hallway here that very quickly widens up to 10 feet wide. Just going to sketch around these rooms. Alright, so we want it to come up, it would be a 10-foot wide hallway here, and that is going to be 1, 2, 3, 6 squares in, pop up by 3. Alright, so that's my upper hallway section. And so now all I'm going to do is put in the last 2 rooms here, and we want this one to be 20 as well, so it's by 4, and there. So now if we zoom out and scroll down, you can see we have a general layout of the whole dungeon. It's a lot of space to cover. And if you're going to be putting this on an online VTT, it's virtual tabletop, like Roll20, which is what we tend to use, this file might be just a hair big for that system. They do it based on megabyte size. So when I export it to a PNG later, because I want those clear areas to be transparent, or to a JPEG, I really have to watch how big that is. If it becomes too large to really upload, I'll either have to trim the exported image and upload 2 images, or what I prefer to do, export it into 2 different JPEGs. I feel like that makes it render just a little bit better, or 2 PNGs, JPEGs, whichever you want, and then upload each one individually. If you're using a different virtual tabletop, then you're totally fine. Now, I don't only do this for virtual tabletops. I will very often for my players, and I actually started by doing this, I'll build these maps, print them off, and then cut them out so I can just lay down room by room instead of having to draw. One, it makes it so you don't have to worry about things wiping off, and you don't have to try to draw everything and get in the player's way and all that stuff. You can just drop a pre-printed, very detailed section of room or hallway or whatever. It's, in my opinion, very fun. When I first started designing dungeons back in, gosh, I don't even know how long ago. It was back when 3.5 was still a big thing. I would do them on poster board, and then I would cut them out, and they were very basic, but you already have them pre-cut out, so you could just save a little bit of time and help with the flow. Now I found with this program, it makes it so I can have it look even better, but my poor wife gets stuck helping me cut them all out. She's a real trooper, but it just kind of is a lot of work on her part. So when she gets really crazy, she'll help me even laminate them, but that's a little bit extreme sometimes. Alright, so I'm just going through and finishing naming some of these so I can more easily track them later. And if you ever can't tell which one you're highlighting, just make it invisible. This is going to be barracks. I believe this is barracks 4. Now I want to include that with the barracks that are already there. Again, I could just select both and group them, but that'll create a weird subfolder where you have barracks folder, and you open it, you have barracks 4 and then barracks group. And I don't really want them to be separated like that. I'd rather them all be in one group together. So we're going to go ahead and cut it. You can see it's disappeared. We'll find the barracks. We'll go into it and we'll paste. Alright, and if I hadn't done that, you'll see that if I had just gone like this and selected... Oh, I lost my barracks. There we go. Alright. And this is why naming as you go is just really helpful. But I get off to talking and it doesn't work, right? So if we have barracks 4 here, and I just select the barracks group, and I go ahead and try to group them, when I go into barracks 4, which is the name it'll retain, you'll see now that I have the barracks group and the barracks, which is just fine, but I think it's just a little bit messy. So what I'll do is I'll cut out barracks 4 from here. Actually, I'm just going to undo it and undo that. Double check. All right. There we go. So now we have barracks 4. We'll do it the right way. We'll cut it, into, and paste. Okay. So once again, I'm getting pretty cluttered over here. So I'm going to go ahead and group some things. Room. Go ahead and name that hall real quick. So if you haven't already seen what we do play Dungeons and Dragons 1 to 2 times a week, depending on how many people. For the next 10 weeks, we'll have 2 campaigns going here on UW Student Veteran Life channel. It'll be every Wednesday and Thursday from 7:30 p.m. or 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. This year, or this quarter at least, our adventurers will be saving Christmas. They've all been called to the North Pole to visit Santa, but when they get there, they find out not everything is holly and jolly. So now that I've got everything named, I've stopped kind of slacking, we'll group my lower hall, the barracks, commander's chamber, war room, upper hall, armory, the training area, and the DFAC together, and we'll call this the cavern. And now it's really easy for me to get into each section and start working on them. So now that I have all my basic floors down, I'm going to go ahead and continue to populate walls and then make the doorways and things of that nature. So I want to start over here with the noble wing. We'll head on into it. All right. So we'll start with the entry hall floor area. I'm going to go ahead and once again add a wall around it. I'm going to click on wall and go to my palette, and I will fill the selected. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and group that with the entry hall floor. And now we'll just end up calling this one entry hall. You can leave it as entry hall floor if you want. I'm just a little pedantic sometimes, a little crazy. So we now see that we have the floor section and the wall again. I'm going to go do all my walls and then trim them for the doors, at least for this wing of the layout. So back into the noble wing, we'll go into the Hall of Dukes, I'll do the same thing, add a wall, group the wall with the floor, and then just take out the word floor. And finally with the lesser noble floor, add a wall and group them together. Sorry, I had a little stroke there, didn't know what I was doing. Alright. So now I have all these walls. I want to make them look good. So Hollow Dukes and Lesser Noble, I can only do one at a time. So we'll start there. We will fill the selected. And we'll do the same thing for the Lesser Noble area. Select the walls and fill them up. Alright, and that's a really quick way to do those walls. Now when I go up into this hidden area, I'm going to show you guys a different technique, because since it is a giant cavern, we want those to kind of look like they were etched out of the wall, so they're going to look a little bit rough. And Dungeon Painter Studio has a really cool tool for that. Alright, so let me put in these other walls and then we'll jump over to that. Let's finish off the walls on the warrior wing. So we'll go into there. And you see me clicking into, you don't have to do that, you can just double click. So on the shrine I could just double click and get in there. But here we're going to go ahead and also add a wall. So I've been adding these walls that all look the same for the original layout areas, right? I'll probably end up changing this wall now that I think of it, but these areas were all originally built at the same time, so it makes sense for them to have the same walls. We're going to change the flooring to kind of represent a little bit of status, but the walls will all stay the same. Here though, we have something that was built a little bit later, right? And this wasn't a sneaky build, it was, you know, built with reverence, but the nobles didn't want to fund it, so it had to come from the warriors, which obviously don't have as much money as nobles. So we'll go ahead and choose a different wall for that section. So we'll add wall, and we'll go ahead and look at folders. Now I'm going to search, and we're just going to go stone. Click on search and we'll see what happens. Right, and you have all these different options down here. Definitely don't want a crystal or a diamond wall. Not a lot of these look like stone, and you can see it's because we're not under walls. There we go. That's one of the few things about Dungeon Painter Studio that can be a little bit irksome, is if you don't click the correct button up here, it doesn't give you all the options you might want. It makes sense why they built it like that, but it's just, if you forget, it can be a pain. So we can go ahead and ignore that phone call. We can look at some of the different walls and see if we like them. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And we're going to select this black gloss wall, because that is the wall around the Lesser Warrior Hall. And we're just going to try different walls and see what we like. No, I think that's a little too futuristic, or it could work in maybe a temple or something, but I'm not liking it for here. Let's try the flat stone pavement. So I kind of really like that. Yeah, I really like this flat stone pavement. It's one that I end up using a lot, because I feel like it looks like it was kind of cobbled together. It's well structured, but it's not beautiful. Another one I use a lot is this stone A, but I'm not sure it fits as well with this aesthetic. We can also try just solid stone, which is another one that I use. Big slabby walls. I think this is better for this will work here actually, and I think we're going to go with a little bit less nice one over on the merchant section. So over in the merchant area, we'll probably use the flat pavement or flat stone pavement. All right, I want to go ahead and just really quickly combine these together. Lesser Warrior. Go into our wall. Now remember, our wall is one big thing. I can't edit it right now, so we'll go ahead and right click and we'll polywall, and that's just created a folder within our folder. And from here I can go ahead and choose which wall I want to edit. I can either go the long way and kind of go through here and see where it, like you can see here in the center, it kind of highlights that wall section. or I can click here, and I just don't want that piece anymore. So I will just go ahead and remove it. And that allows me to have all this space, right? And we will go ahead and do the same thing to some of our other areas, putting in the walls. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and work over here on the kind of cleaved out area that would have been used for the people of lower income that kind of just built their way out after a while. All right, so we're in the merchant base folder. We're gonna go ahead and go to the poor merchant floor because that's what we named that area. Again, we're gonna add a wall. And I want this to be a really kind of sketch looking wall, right? So maybe we'll go into stone B. I'll go ahead and zoom in so we can look at this. We have our wall that we just put in. And let's go ahead and fill that in. Now you can see it looks like it's a dirty wall. It's got some stone stuffed in there, but instead of mortar, maybe it just has a lot of packed earth. That's definitely kind of the aesthetic we're going for here. And that'll be even more apparent when we go ahead and change the floors here in a minute. All right, so we'll group that. Looking at the merchant shrine, merchant middle, and merchant base, I definitely wanted to make those floors a little bit different, but we'll get to floors in a minute. All right, so I think we have some good walls over here. Things are looking pretty good. We're gonna have to put in a double door here and some doors here. So let's go ahead and do that before we move on to the next section. All right, so in the noble wing, we'll go ahead and go into that. We'll start with the entry hall. Now I don't have to necessarily cut out a hole for a door here. I could just place a door on top of it. But just for practice, we're going to go ahead and go through and turn this into a poly wall, and we'll cut that down as well. All right, I want it to be about there. That was weird. All right, so we're going to go ahead and, like before, select this wall, and then we'll copy and paste it and drag it over. There we go. So that's where I'll put a door. And since we don't need those white lines, we can cut those out here in just a little bit. All right. So we are going to go ahead and now edit up this wall real quick. Don't know why it's being silly. Since this is still in the advanced release, the kind of alpha version of the program, every once in a while the controls will kind of glitch just a little bit. Right, and when that happens, we just need to go ahead and sign out and jump back in. But it looks like what I'm having here is the walls from the two rooms overlapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and completely cut this wall out. Right, and we will work on the noble wing, go to the Hall of Dukes, and we can turn that into a poly wall and then make our doorway. We'll also just kind of back it up a little bit to cover what we just cut out. So we'll go into there, cut on over, and drop that. All right, enter, we'll copy and paste it. And then we'll drag that on over. So now we have that kind of, if we scroll down, that double entrance that we wanted right here. Double door. It's gonna be nice and wide and fancy. We do the same thing right up here. That area would be, still a nice wrought double door, but nothing near as fancy as the Hall of Dukes. Now, I'd originally considered doing the Hall of Dukes front and center right here. But I felt like they would not want the rabble to get to where the highest nobles were laid. But they'd also want all the lesser nobles to have to walk by and respect the dukes as they're laying their dead to rest. and kind of remember the lineage of everything that's happened. So it's really good when you are working on building a map, whether it be a dungeon, a castle, a town, or especially a world map, to think about the politics that take place in your world. It helps kind of shape how you build things, and later on how your characters are going to interact with one another. So coming into lesser nobles, we're going to again turn that into a polywall, and I will go into it, make sure I got my selection cursor on, double click, and again a double door. Enter, copy, paste, and drag that over. And we're left with that double door. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a quick peek. Lesser Hall work looks good. Hall of Dukes looks good. Alright, looking over it laterally at all my rooms, they have their doorways. One of the worst things you can do is forget to put in a doorway like I have right here. Alright, it's an easy fix though, especially if you're using a virtual tabletop. You can just take an element offline or organically in your virtual tabletop and just kind of drop it right on top of what you have. It's a little bit ugly because then you'll have doors on top of walls, but it still works. At the end of the game, at the end of the day, you still have a map, you still have a game, and if you got players, you're good to go. They just might, give you a little heck for it. Alright, so we'll come back in here and we'll fix those doors. And really, these are going to be a super easy fix because I already have other walls there. I don't have to build more walls to make up for what I just cut out. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do the flooring in this area real quick, and then we'll move on to finishing the walls and floors up top. Alright, so the more I look at it, the more I'm not liking this floor here. It just doesn't feel quite right. So we're going to start in our entry hall. It's going to be the most ornate, lavish, and I'm thinking maybe like a white marble type of room with marble pillars and things like that. So let's go ahead and see what we have for that. We'll choose our floors, and we'll just look at stone first to see what options we have. Now, typing stone sometimes won't pull up all the stone things. They might be, it all depends on how the creator named that thing. So he might have put in rock or just marble or something. So sometimes it behooves you just kind of go through each of the folders and find what you want and really get familiarized with what's in there. I have a few that I normally routinely fall back on for different scenarios. Like this limestone floor, I really tend to like for entry halls, or I have a room in one of my campaigns where it's a magic room surrounded by portals, and this is the floor for it, just because it's got that clean kind of aseptic feel, right? We could just put some basic stone in there, but I don't think I want to do that for this room. Again, it's supposed to be like the wow factor. Now if we wanted to go something a little bit darker, we could go with this fancy stone, and that would just not work with that size, so we would need to scale it up a little bit, but I'm just not digging it. So we will keep searching and see if there's anything else we like. Kind of like this one, but I still think we're gonna go with that sandstone. This would be really good in the warrior hall. So we'll remember the stone tiles blue-gray, and they're going to be in our palette. So what we'll do is we'll go with the kind of pristine white. Still selected. I do really like this pattern. Alright, and looking at the scale, let's see what 100% looks like. I actually think this larger scale works really well in this room with this pattern, so we're going to leave it. Now, I want the rest, every other room, to be different than the entryway. The entryway is supposed to kind of be that wow factor, right? The Hall of Nobles, the rest of the Hall of Nobles will still have that wow factor, but not quite as much. And in here, we'll probably put some I don't know, some memorial or something that people can come and pay their respects at. We're also going to have some of the nobles buried in the walls here. So that would be where the heads of the different families are, because in this world, the dukes are important, but it's really the heads of the family that run everything. So we'll have that in here, and that'll be that's the fanciest. Going to the Hall of Dukes, we can do the flooring, and we want something nice. We want something slick. So let's go ahead and actually pull up the commercial use pack. We have a lot of different options here, and let's go with, I don't want bare stone, that'll be up higher. Stone tiles though. Do I like this one? I think it's a little bit darker than what I want. We'd obviously scale that down, but I can tell I'm not going to like it. So let's go ahead and look at some of our other packs real quick. Now Dragonvale is good, but if you're going to do a build in Dragonvale, I suggest doing all or most of it in that. As you can see, it's slightly more cartoony than some of the rest, which can be a really fun aesthetic. I did a whole Christmas campaign, nearly a whole Christmas campaign in the Dragonville, and it really just helped add to that kind of whimsical aesthetic. That's not what I'm going for here. I'm kind of trying to go a little bit grittier and realistic. So we'll go ahead and just kind of bump through some of these different texture packs. And I think we're going to land on TOTS Complete Fantasy. That's usually my go-to. It's a really big pack. It kind of encompasses some of the elements from other packs as well. And so this is everything in TOTS. I do like these granite blocks. We have a lot of these interesting patterns here. And we have some really busy ones too. This marble design and the marble fancy, I've used them and they can be really overwhelming. So if you're going to do them, either shrink them down or do them in a room that doesn't have much else going on, because it'll really overwhelm what's going on with your actual build. And there's exceptions, of course. Someone might just be a little bit extravagant and over the top, but you have to think about that in your build. So looking across, again, I like that one, but we're probably going to use that over in the Hall of Warriors. What about this? I don't hate that, but I don't think it's quite regal enough. So we're going to bump that up into the Lesser Nobles area. But I definitely like it. Like in all these. Too blue. And we don't want it to be a wood floor. Wouldn't really make sense in the mausoleum. So we'll go ahead and back it up, and I think we're going to end up going with one of these granite design blocks. Too blue again. Too dark. Let us really quickly just see what other marbles there are. Maybe just some white marble. That hurts my eyes, but I think I actually really like it. We'll leave that for now. We might come back to it. Alright, and up here in the Lesser Noble area, we had already decided, going back into folders, TOTS Complete Fantasy, that we liked, and by we that's a managerial we, I mean me, liked this one. Alright, so I don't always change up the floors. in every room. I actually find that can be a little bit overwhelming if you try and do a different floor in every room, and it kind of kills the flow. It doesn't really make sense, right? But in this one, since it was built over time, it would make sense that they didn't use the same floor in every room. So in these areas, this will all be the same floor, but this that was added later will be different. Let's go ahead and add that right now. Really quickly, pull that up, and that, great. So I'm running two screens right now, trying to make sure everything's flowing well. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this floor, change it real quick. I'm sorry, we're actually gonna start with these floors since we already have picked that one. So we'll go into the Warrior Wing, and we'll start with the Hall of Heroes lower. Choose that floor, and we just need to find what we had picked before. So it's good not to have your heart set on one thing because you just might not find it. Let's check our palette. I know we clicked on it before, but our palette didn't hold on to it, which is okay. Go ahead and look through the stone one more time. And looking at this, I might actually change the Hall of Nobles, the Hall of Dukes, to that. That's pretty sharp looking. We'll see how it looks in comparison to the white. You notice where that TBI comes into play. Sometimes you just totally forget what you were going to do. Any of you who have seen or participated in one of my campaigns knows that happens on the regular. There it is, right at the end. Alright, we're going to go ahead and fill selected. So I really like that, but I feel like the blocks are a little bit too big. Because remember, each of these squares is 5 feet, and so it makes really big tiles. I want them to be just a hair smaller, I think. So we'll go ahead and edit that, and we'll scale it down just a smidge. And you can faintly see the lines here. If you need them to be a little bit darker, you can kind of turn the lines up. And that's what I'm going to do, because I kind of want these to be about 5 feet, right? So let's actually dial it down to be, you can fit a couple in a 5-foot square. So we'll go just a little bit higher, and then we'll give me a horizontal shift and a vertical shift. I like that. All right, I'm gonna back these down a little bit because I don't need those super bright lines anymore. Come back to our layers and we hit enter. So I kind of like that. It has a little bit of a tighter feel, I think. So looking at that, we know that our scale is going to be 50. And that'll come into play when we go to the Hall of Heroes upper, because we're going to do the same thing on this floor. Fill selected, edit, drop it down to 50. And we will shift that over as well. Perfect. Oh, unfortunately, if you move your mouse after you finish, just shift. Before you finish clicking, it'll shift everything. Alright, what I don't like is now these floors aren't matching up here. So I had this lined up to the grid. I liked that, but when I look at the place where the floors are supposed to meet, they don't match up, and I don't like that. I like it to be a little more continuous. So we're going to move this horizontal shift like that. That looks a little bit better. Alright, we're going to go ahead and go up into the shrine here, and it's going to get the same floor. Alright. Fill selected. Again, we're going to change that down to 50. And we'll do our horizontal and vertical shifts. Alright. And so it looks like we have a really continuous floor all the way through. It's a good detail to have. So we'll do that. Now I haven't really picked a flooring pattern to go up in the lesser warrior area. So let's go ahead and take a peek there. I think I want it to be a little more rough. We could try that. I think the transitions is a little too stark. So let's go with something that's a similar color maybe, or similar pattern, one of the two. Maybe the basic stone white. I think that's too crisp and too clean. It's like a cave bottom. Maybe this. This is a little bit lighter than the rest of it. Doesn't look bad, but I really don't feel like it's exactly what we want. So maybe we'll try the darker end. And I think that's gonna be it right there. The aged stone tiles. I like that. But again, I think those tiles are a little bit larger than I want. So let's go ahead and try scaling them down to maybe 50. Let's try 75. I like that at 75. They're a little bit smaller than these, and you get a little more of that weathered, worn pattern in there, which they kind of exhibit, right? All right. So let's come over and do the merchant wing. Alright, so over here we're definitely going to have it be not quite as pretty. I think we'll do the same flooring that we did over in the warrior wing, just for continuity. It would all have been built around the same time. So we'll go into the merchant base level. That's this bottom level right here. And we'll zip all the way to the right. Might be really tempting to do a ton of different floors because there are so many options. But again, like we talked about earlier, it just really can detract from what's going on and be overwhelming, both to yourself when you're trying to build it and to the player, and it can really ruin your credibility and continuity. Just like when you're writing a story, we're trying to create that willing suspension of disbelief that the player might have, because the more they are willing to have that suspended disbelief, they call it in writing, the more it feels like they're actually part of the story, and they really just get a lot more into it. But having too many continuity errors or things that just don't make logical sense can really detract from that. Alright. So what I'm doing here is I am using my mouse arrows to adjust the flooring by tiny increments. It's a lot easier than having to scroll back and forth and try to get it. And we'll do the same thing up here in the merchant shrine area. All right, so we are going to again resize that. So some people, and even in some of my builds, I will pick the floors right off the bat and build around that, especially if I kind of know the general aesthetic and what the layout of the um, build is going to be. But oftentimes I find that when I do that, my ideas change and I end up coming back and changing all the floors anyway. So if you have like a pirate ship or something, that's pretty straightforward. You pick a plank that you like and you just go with it. Same with the castle. Each floor might have a different type of flooring, maybe stone on the bottom and then either stone or wood on the subsequent floors depending on the castle. But just be open to change, especially if you're doing something like this where it's built over time. So we kind of talked about how on this one and the Hall of Dukes we might like a different floor. Let's just see what that one looks like. We'll search that marble and find that darker marble. Nope. So I'm not finding it there, but we know that we saw it in the Tots Complete Fantasy. And I'm sorry that every once in a while the screen seems to jump or you get those little black marks on it. This program doesn't work on Mac, and so I am streaming it from my laptop to the Mac and then from the Mac to you guys. And there are some aspect ratio issues, and of course whenever you stream something from machine to machine, you have a little bit of loss of information. So that's what we're dealing with right now. Won't be like that forever, but for the time being that's what we're working with. So looking at this, I'm not seeing the flooring that I wanted. So I guess we're just going to leave it, and I'll try to find it later and come back to it. Alright, in our final few minutes, we're going to go ahead and pick the floor here. And then next time when we come back, we'll work on all the stuff up top and then get around to actually filling it with some embellishments. Alright, so the last thing I guess we're going to do is choose the floor here. That's going to bring us to our merchant wing and the poor merchant floor. And now I want this to be kind of a step above dirt or solid rock, but not too much more. So maybe we'll look at something like these stone slabs. Okay, potential. Maybe a darker one? No. So I'm not hating that. We'll keep that in our back pocket. Could do just a cracked rock. That's going to be it right there. I really like that. Way too big again, so we're going to scale that down because each of those is a 5-foot wide slab. And I don't think poor folks would have been sneaking in 5-foot wide slabs of stone to bury their family members in. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit smaller. So again, we're kind of matching the size over here. That helps with that continuity so that we can kind of have the same size tiles, but different color and texture. It helps it flow just a little bit better. You know, having an element carry over. That looks good, I think. And then I noticed we're missing a door here, so we'll go ahead and go into our wall. We'll change it into a poly wall because we haven't done that yet. And we will kill this wall. Alright. With that, we're looking pretty decent right now. So we've gone from a blank canvas to having all of our floors done, almost all of our lower floors done, almost all of our walls. So really at this point, all we have to do is some structural stuff up top, which will be a little bit quicker since most of it's going to be the same. All the flooring up here will be the same except for maybe 1 or 2 rooms. Like in the training room, we'll have some mats or some wood floor or something. and the walls. So we'll get into different textured walls next time, talking about how to lay out these different rooms and why I did this layout upstairs, why it makes sense to me. Thank you for watching us today. Appreciate if you would subscribe to our channel or give it a like down at the bottom here. If you have any questions you want answered or anything you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week.